crypto and blockchain, that this is such a confusing field. They really need people in the Hill and staff and everyone else you work with that can explain those types of things. And then, of course, the Chrysler financial crisis situation, having people that know the deep tax issues involved in that, it just shows the importance of having not just the relationship lobbying, but the expertise side. And of course, a message to all the international audience: the trust, honesty, reputation piece is essential to really keep the industry growing throughout the world. So thank you, Dina. And I guess now, Kateryna, we'll move over to you for some maybe one of the projects you worked on in Ukraine and perhaps elsewhere. And again, I ask you to stay within the 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Will be shortly. So for many people here, interesting was the main difference between these practices, because as Dina mentioned, this Italian understanding that connections, it's the most important in lobbying, more important than good text of law and so on and so forth. It's more deeply problem in countries of Eastern Europe and Middle Asia than Italy. But we have something in common in mentality. So thank you for this example as a very bright example. So I'm explaining my company, C Group, originally work in Ukraine firstly with campaign management. And I know that, for example, Michael's experience also the same. So many people from campaign management who manage big election campaign and who have like also connections and understanding of decision-making process, they go in countries of Eastern Europe to also run government relations practice. Why? Because it's really understandable. You have staff, you must pay salary to staff, and after elections, you must find new contracts for them. But first issue, which is really important for Ukraine and for Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Moldova, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, which I have experience to work, it's that firstly in our country, you must create industry. So firstly, you must create institution, then to sell this lobbying contract. Even I, for example, work with Ukrainian aviation system and Ukrainian aviation company, with Ukrainian steel company, with Ukraine farm distribution company. So it's the biggest players on Ukrainian field. So it's not oligarch business, but big business in Ukraine. And directly this business don't understand the difference between, for example, really financing elections in Ukraine, the same in Moldova, the same in Georgia, and tools of lobbying. So if you wanna in our countries sell this contract and have additional budget in their budget of these companies for lobbying, you must create this industry. How to create it? Firstly, it must be discussion about lobbying law, of course, because without this discussion, people don't feel that it's actual in your country. And really, I thanks to all members of parliament which support my further initiative of writing lobbying law and pushing this law to parliament. Unfortunately, in that period, presidents don't want to support this law, and usually president's team is the biggest team in our parliament. But it became great wave of discussion, and media also wanted to do big media project. What is lobbying? Is lobbying corruption, or lobbying it's anti-corruption action? What is lobbying? How to do lobbying, for example, for women's rights, yeah, to like advocacy? How to do lobbying for public health, or how to do lobbying for industry, for example, big industries. Also in our association we have private defense producers industry, which is huge in Ukraine. We have people from government defense industry production, which is also huge industry in Ukraine, but they only start to develop their associations not far ago, like 4 years ago. So that's why it's very important to understand that still why Americans not so representative on our markets, because our clients, our big companies don't understand what they buy. Like they don't understand what is due diligence. That's why they don't want to buy due diligence, because they don't understand what is due diligence. And they can have many money, they can have huge company, but they work in other way. Secondly, it's of course hybrid understanding of government relations work, because mostly people understand government relations work as media work, as PR work. Even I know in Kazakhstan, also my colleagues like Ayajan, Dina, which have a membership in our community, and Ayajan also start association there. It's a very big understanding of GR like PR work and media work. And it's also true, it's part of work, but it's also have other side, because if you push some term, for example, that we need more clear energy, and clear energy, it's also issue which population must pay like 10 times more for this energy. So it's not very popular thing really in the question of budget and in the question of dotations. But they don't work good about text of law. And that's why in our country, sometimes clients said that let's do big media campaigns, that we need green energy, for example, that and every members of parliament from committee and from tax committee must understand that we must dotate this green energy in Ukraine. And also European Union and directives of European Union, which is very important in countries which is in European Union, and they adaptate directives of European Commission. And in our countries like Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, who move into European Union, it's also very important, like what European Union said. But then when we like prepare parliament for voting, we understand the text is bad, that it can't work. It can't work, for example, in implementation in all government structures and so on and so forth. So that's why one more like case tip, that in our country is very important not to do only what client to do in his understanding, like it will be media work and some meetings with parliamentaries, but also of course working on the text, because sometimes we miss it. And third question, it's of course working outside, because in our countries mostly work, of course, with European Parliament and European Commission, because we move into European Union, and as you know, we must do many paperwork and law work. More than 400 laws must be voted to give us opportunity to go to European Union. The same Moldova, the same Georgia. Some countries go through it, and that's why also we're not used to work with bureaucracy. Sometimes people understand that one meeting, for example, with Vice President of European Parliament can give solution to their case. But it's not true, because you must work with European Commission 3 years to like put into the plan and into the budget of European Commission. And it's one more tip of working in Ukraine and other Eastern countries, that you must explain that it's not short-term results, because every client wanted to have result from 2 weeks till 2 months till result. I know that here people who are best lobbyists don't sign contracts if it's not contracts for a year or for 3 years, you know, and so on and so forth. So it's also one more different.
I don't force like those kind of contracts on people usually.
But in Ukraine, they sometimes come and said, oh, we pass all, we have problems with parliament, we don't do anything, that's why now we must do veto of president of this law. And that's why they mostly use like informational campaign outside in foreign media, and so on and so forth. And sometimes it works, but you know, it's really very often questions that people come where it's needed veto of president on some question. So it's also very interesting tip. And I think that way for our countries, it's creating government relations society in our countries. It's do education for clients. And of course, it's connect and do education how they must do lobbying in European Union and lobbying in US here. And also one more interesting question is of course lobbying in Arabic countries, because it's totally different. And I see this when we have meetings with Sheikh's office. So it's totally different understanding, but also we must work with them because it's energy question, which is now very important. If you have some direct questions, also feel free to ask it, but I hope that these tips, it's a little bit create understanding of our market. And now it's more similar to African markets than to market of lobbying in United States. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Kateryna. It sounds like a lot of your experience comes from Central Asia and some of the expansion of lobbying practices into there. And that the value, one of the things is that being that they don't have lobbying registration requirements, laws to do this, their experience with lobbying is lower. So you're actually spending a lot of time trying to explain the value of how that could help them and the benefits to making better policy as a result. You know, and not having that lobbying legislation or policy in place is a problem. And we've experienced that as well. And particularly it hurts us when we're looking for partners in other countries. And you go into a country, and I don't know if any of you around the table have tried to do this, you know, try to find somebody that does government relations in Central America and Southeast Asia, places like that. It's not, without a lobbying law, people aren't advertising themselves in that field. And you spend a lot of time trying to find people. We tend to work with the US Embassy a lot through commercial services, trying to dig down and find out who's out there doing consulting, but that would really help if we had lobbying registration rules. It would bring up the marketing of people for it to be identified. So
I just was going to say real quickly, there is a you know, a lot of times with a client like this, you have to really draft up a comprehensive plan of what you're going to do. But the reality is, if you are lobbying for a new entity that has, you know, no presence in the US or has a small presence in the US and it's never lobbied, you have to brand yourself, and that takes some time. You have to like brand the company, have the origin story, have your 2-pager, and Hill staff are so crazy busy and people in the administration are so busy that you have to, you feel like, okay, did I get anything out of that? Like, you have to do it repetitively before it starts to stick. And that can be very frustrating, but that is just the reality of like how things work in the US.
great. Okay, Vadym, over to you.
Thank you. So I will talk about topic of digital health. And my company, Care21, built one of the leading digital health platform. We're targeting one of the most important, one of the most expensive part of a healthcare. It's health issues of people with chronic diseases, especially seniors, and even in US as a development world, in US and Europe, 65, more than 70% of them have 2 or more chronic conditions, and very much handling these conditions, caring for these people, it's the biggest part, the most expensive part of a healthcare budget. We built platforms that patient-centric and combine remote patients monitoring, chronic care management, telehealth, and in US market, which was very important, there are also monetary compensation for doctors who are doing preventive care. So we built also part that combined this budgeting and financial issues into the system. So system like our clients can monetize their effort and receive compensation from Medicare. As a company, we're partnering with Dell Technologies and Nippon Telephone and Telegraph for expanding into international market. In particular, with NTT, we working on Australia, New Zealand, and Southeastern Asia market. Dell help us as a technology partner where our system running on the Dell servers. And one of a very interesting issue as regulations in the healthcare, because and with the digital health, these regulations became more important and sometimes cumbersome because questions how data transferred, who own medical data. HIPAA regulations in US not covered all of them, and a lot of things became as a gray area because by HIPAA regulations, for example, patient own their own data. At the same time, electronic health record systems trying to not to share information. So there are new laws, new regulations that facilitate this data exchange between medical organizations. But still, the most important, let's say, electronic tool of exchange of medical data is a fax machine. And with the fax machine, when it's a paper coming to another office, it's again data entering and a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems. And this is why by Johns Hopkins Medical Journal, medical mistakes actually coming as a third leading cause of death in the United States. So we're talking even about United States. In European Union, despite the fact that it's a European Union, every country has their own medical regulations and own requirements on data exchange and data sovereignty. So let's say if we would like to start our system and provide it to customers in Slovenia, we need to install servers in Slovenia. And the same is right for a lot of countries. Again, different countries has different regulations. So this is very important for us to know what's the regulations background for using in a healthcare. And one other area that I would like to touch today, it's actually a proliferation of a huge number of medical devices. And medical devices coming right now everywhere. And we as a company integrated right now more than 200 different devices. And trying, we generally do data gathering, data exchange, make this data actionable for doctors to provide preventive care. So like by our latest studies, we can reduce more than 15% of hospitalizations for seniors, which is very significant number. And we're using many different devices, starting from iWatches, for example, up to biointelligence stickers. This is device that couple of our clients, nursing homes, attached to patient chest when patient coming from a hospital, and it's constantly monitor up to 12 different health conditions, including heart rate, temperature, coughing, etc., etc. So it's a lot of information that available immediately through our system going to medical personnel and available for personnel to provide immediate monitoring of a patient's reaction if patients need help. And when patient discharged from rehabilitation center to home, they coming home with devices and continue to be monitored by a system. So we can help reduce hospitalization of the seniors and prevent a lot of very serious acute conditions like congestive heart failure, which can be diagnosed by constantly monitoring patients' blood pressure, let's say 2 times per day, and monitoring patients' weight. Because even like a small increase in weight, stable increase, related to data, to water retention in the body, can in a 3, 4, 5 days result in a very acute condition and hospitalizations. Hospitalization of a senior of these conditions can cost healthcare system from $50,000 to $70,000. At the same time, if doctors know about conditions and about this situation, like just calling a patient and ask to increase amount of diuretics they're taking, they can prevent hospitalization. So this is, let's say, $2 additional pills versus 70,000 of expense through hospitalization, rehabilitation, and even not counting load it's giving on the patient by itself, on the family, and everybody around. So another device that we integrated using, it's a MedWand. This small device can do a lot of features as a remote monitoring equipment, starting from, let's say, technician can check a lot of functions of a patient and transfer remotely to doctor's office, including including ACG and oxygen saturation and a lot of other features. So another one more thing that I would like to say, we're talking right now, working right now with a Singaporean company, Nevrotech, and we integrated in our mobile apps possibility to get vitals from a patient's just on looking on a cell phone screen. And we right now collecting heart rate, respiratory rate, stress level, oxygen saturation, and in the near future, in a matter of weeks, we will have a blood pressure also readings from a cell phone, just looking on it. So later, probably in after I can show how it works.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think you're coming from it, which is very helpful from a client perspective, and some of the things we've been talking about, especially for something like healthcare. That healthcare so,
right now became more and more human rights.
Yeah, there's no more regulated industry than healthcare, and especially when you're talking about patient info.
Probably financial.
Yes,
right,
always.
right. But I think what you're finding, or what you're suggesting, is as you go into these countries, you also need people that are experts. It kind of brings up some of Dina's points, and you know, if you can have that expertise, and if you can find them, you would like to retain them to help you. But that's a challenge that this industry has in other countries. So, okay, our last presenter, Adam, hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to Kateryna for this wonderful event and forum today. Playing kind of the cleanup role and being the last after all these speakers, you know, you have to kind of look at what hasn't been touched on because so much has been hit. Really, in the United States, lobbying is about helping clients, whether they be U.S. corporations, whether they be organizations or international clients, navigate the complex, right? The bureaucratic system of the American government is not as simple as just the 3 branches of government, and each have unique set powers, and then they have these checks and balances. There is a mastery of trying to figure out how do you move through each of these branches, and where can there be opportunity. Representing international clients, which I and my firm have done for years upon years, is helping them really understand how the American system works. It is so different. And we heard Dina mention the example with a company saying I could just pick up the phone and call the Italian prime minister. Why can't I pick up the phone and call the American president? It is helping them understand how does this system work, and how do you move through it while still being able to identify your opportunity and achieve your goals and reach the success that it is that you're seeking in U.S. public policy. Because this system has been built and is continuing to be built by those who are trying to preserve and protect it the way that it is. It is not trying to drain the swamp in any regard by those who are continuing to manage and run that. And so really managing those clients' expectations and helping them really see and understand how this system works, but partnering with those international clients with their experts on the ground and helping them be able to draw that parallel to how it connects and relates to their system of public policy at home. And drawing that clear distinction of at home, you may be able to do it this way, but here we have to move in this direction, or we're gonna have to clear all of these hurdles or these procedures first before we can move to there. It is a key component. Another topic that many have touched on, it is important, is there's very few times where things are short burst victories, where you suddenly get a client and they tell you, I have this issue and I need it solved within 2 days. It doesn't happen like that. This is a process. It takes months upon months, if not years, to build out those relationships, to create the awareness and the understanding throughout Capitol Hill or a particular agency or department as to the particular issue that you're concerned with. And we see consistent turnover of members, of staff, both within the Congress, in the federal agencies and departments, and at the White House. And so you're constantly having to continue to re-engage and educate and build out that awareness while maintaining those very strong relationships that you have. And clients hire lobbyists really for, I think, believe a perfect blend of what Dina mentioned, of both those who have great relationships and can open doors, who can get you in front of the decision makers, the key people who are going to play a role in you achieving what it is that your client seeks, but also those with a certain level of subject matter expertise. If you go into any meeting, even with a mid to low level staffer, and you may have that great relationship, but if you don't even know the issue and can talk to at least some extent of it, you're going to find very little success in what it is you're seeking out of those meetings and engagements. A final point that I would mention is, regardless, especially in the United States, regardless of who's in power, and does one party hold all complete power? Is it divided? Whatever that might be, for the vast majority, the staff and members want to find success, and they want to work with those who may be of the opposite party to help identify where there can be opportunities for collaboration and shared success. And if you go in with that notion of, I'm not here to be a political enemy of yours, I'm not here to cause disruption or be an annoyance to you, but I know that your boss's goal is this, and I believe that my client has the opportunity or a solution or a product, service, whatever it might be, that can help your boss achieve that goal, that can go a very long way. And especially if you can also approach it from, and your boss can take all the credit. I don't care for the credit. My client doesn't want it. You guys can take all of that. We just want to be involved and play a process in this decision-making role. It can really help open up an immeasurable amount of opportunities when you go in with that cooperative spirit, but not going in with more of the daggers and shields up ready to try to create a political battle or war. No matter what the gridlock is in Washington, there is still always opportunity, but that gridlock can slow things down. And progress does not always happen as quickly as clients would like. And that's why it's important to help, as I go back to, again, managing that expectation, helping them see and understand what we're accomplishing and achieving. This is why these sets of meetings were important and what they delivered. And through that, we're now going to move to this next stage. So really helping them navigate that by giving them a very detailed and thorough roadmap of what you're going into, but helping them also realize that roadmap can change at any moment, right? Issues arise and come and go in the United States very rapidly. 3 weeks ago, nobody would ever thought that Congress would be voting on a series of gun legislation. And now here we are, as Congress is just a few blocks away from here, voting on a series of packages relating to gun rights and the Second Amendment in the United States. But again, a month ago, the gun lobby was relatively kind of breathing a sigh of relief, thinking, all right, we're not going to come up before the midterms. We can take a break and then you get plunged into it. So and same with energy, right? With the war in Eastern Europe, things change very rapidly here, and that can delay things that you're working on because that may have been a priority, but as these new issues arise, it can start to sideline other efforts and priorities that were set out initially. And so it's just being patient, but also being very creative and being willing to challenge that status quo. And just because it's always been done this way, you don't want to offend anyone and completely overstep, but step outside that box and look at it from a different perspective. It can really help move things in a different direction that can usually yield some positive results.
Can I just follow up on that really quick? I think that I agree with everything that you said. Really, everything is true about that. You do have to have a detailed plan, but even though there is that gridlock and things change all the time, there are people on the Hill, especially as if you stay up there for too long, like me and other people, that behind the scenes, they quietly get things done. And they get along on a bipartisan basis. So things do get done. It's just done in a way that is very quiet. And sometimes you build it very slowly. The navigation of Washington is really important because you need to be making sure that you're bipartisan. You're going to see the right people on the right committees. You're going to see the right people in the agencies. You're going to see them in the right order. How you build your legislation and the support behind it. If you get a bill introduced, for instance, and it's some random freshman senator or congressman that's not on the committee of jurisdiction, yeah, you can point, the lobbyists will say, oh, look what I did for you. But it's meaningless in the US, right? You can point to it back home, but it's meaningless. So you want to make sure that you're working with people that can that know how to do that. And aren't just flashing like proof of, oh, I got this legislation introduced. Well, it doesn't have any shot of passing, right? Or I got this letter for you. So that is something, again, that's why it's important. You have your people who have their expertise and their connections with very high level people. You have some people who are doing the political work, which does help with access to the members. And then you really have your, not subject matter experts, but as was just said, it's like being an expert on how to navigate the US government and understanding each area is a little different, but understanding that the agencies and the Congress are, even though they're separate branches of government, they're very interconnected. And you have to understand that they influence each other, and the agencies are full of former Hill staffers. And people who are in the administration have to be confirmed by the Senate. So there's a lot of interconnection there. So anyway, I agree. That was, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. And we're going to move to the questions part of our panel today, but just some of the takeaways that maybe we get some of the questions from Adam's talk is, you brought up the complexity of the system. And I think that if you have US clients coming in with your firm, of course, it's even complex to them, but imagine your foreign clients must just think it's even incredibly insurmountable. So I think government relations and the ability to help with being a technician to explain that process is extremely important. And I also caught on to this idea that you're always looking for the partnership concepts that you can bring to the table, whether it's a politician or somebody in the agencies. I think they're important points. So,
well, and building off what you just said there, Tim, when U.S. companies hire lobbyists here in the United States, they still don't fully understand that system, and it is very complicated.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But when you have international clients that come from a very different system of governance, for example, if you're representing a client that comes from a state that is a monarchy, they don't understand why it takes so long. Right. One person just cannot solve something. Even the head of state, the president does not enjoy universal exclusive powers like a monarch might in another state. And it's helping them really begin to see and understand the variety of different channels you're going to have to go through to achieve what it is you're seeking.
Right.
It does not happen as in the same route that it could back home.
And you're falling into that role of instructor for quite a bit to get them to the point where you can even talk sense to them about it. So
instructor and almost referee.
Okay, so I guess we're going to start with questions. We have just over a half an hour left. So maybe we want to.
I have a question from first panel, which we don't discuss.
Okay.
So one question was how Russia do lobbying here in United States. This was an interesting question. And secondly, for people from the Ariel Cohen panel was not understandable. For example, what is the difference, for example, if you invite congressmen to think tanks meetings and like do some explanation of, I don't know, new bills about energy efficiency on the discussion in think tank, and for example, you meetings as a lobbyist. So it was not clear for audience what is the difference. It was questions from Kazakhstan. And I think for me, directly also interesting to, I know that Vadym work in Ghana with e-health questions, so how they cooperate also with the government there. So I think that it will be interesting question. And then I will check one more.
Okay. Does anyone want to tackle? I wasn't here for the whole thing, so I'm not sure.
Kateryna, can you explain the first question again? Yeah. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying about lobbying versus not lobbying.
Yeah. So for our audience from Middle Asia, don't understand. For example, if we push some law and it's like a bill which is already, for example, in Congress, what is the difference by register meetings with congressmen from committee and, for example, inviting these congressmen to think tanks discussion about the same issue? So what is the difference?
I mean, I think it's two separate things, right? Yeah. So if you're going up onto the Hill and let's say you have a bill that got introduced, you are lobbying for something because you're trying to get something passed, right? If you are, I'm going to take one step in another direction. I just spent a whole day on the Hill with one of the boards I'm on, and we were just educating the Hill about what is going on with MiCA, which is in the European Commission. It's the law on blockchain and cryptocurrency that hasn't passed yet for legislation. If you're a congressman is going to a think tank, most think tanks are structured in that they can't lobby. The congressman may be going there to meet. There's a variety of reasons. They might be speaking on their bill. They might be getting educated by the think tank. They may be working closely with the think tank because the think tank is doing research on the topic. If you're doing advocacy work, you're lobbying and you have to register.
But for example, from my perspective, for example, I was 5 years ago on meeting in Hudson Institute, like popular think tank, which was developed on China question. But there was not only about political question, but also about export-import laws which connect with China. Is it, for example, but in political campaigning, it's called forum communication. When you form some position from experts, from media, and so on and so forth. It's important part in every election campaign or in every lobbying campaign. So we use this too. But it's not lobbying by law, as we understand. Because in our country, when, for example, American Chamber of Commerce do meetings with Prime Minister, it's originally lobbying because they like discuss questions which interesting for American business or European Business Association. It's a huge organization. I think that it exists in many European countries. They also have a meeting, for example, with Trade Minister, and they discuss issues of canceling some import fees. So that's why I see from first panel that for our audience don't understandable this line. What is lobbying And what is not lobbying?
I think it's pretty much based, right? For it's if it's a specific bill or policy initiative that's before the Congress or a budget or the agency, that triggers the lobbying. If it's just some forum where you're discussing without tying it back to a budget or a specific bill or policy, then it's not considered.
That's more of like an issue advocacy.
Yeah, that.
I mean, there are also sort of these tests about the percentage of time you're spending with that client on lobbying, but you know, for me, if I have a client and we really are advocating for something, even if I'm doing a host of other legal work for them, because I'm a lawyer, I will be safe and still register, because it's better to be over compliant than to be under compliant. You mentioned elections. So I know there's a fine line, but the reality is the US tries to separate out official business from elections and campaign finance. So we draw a wall, and it's not a perfect wall, between the two. So it doesn't really get, and it's different set of staffers typically, or if you're going to use a staffer from the Hill, they've got to take time off to do that work, and it has to be, you know, they have to agree to do it voluntarily. So we try to put up this wall, and in some offices that I worked in, they had really rigid walls between, you know, any kind of political activity as what versus official activity. And others, like, you know, more, I would say in the House, there is less of a wall, even though there's, just because they're smaller and it's not as noticeable. But yeah, it's very much, it's supposed to be two separate things. You're not really supposed to be lobbying at a fundraiser, which is a breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or you travel with members of Congress. But you have to be careful what you say and how you say it. But some of it borders on lobbying.
So yeah, we'll do a mix of questions from the internet and then questions from our guests. But one question I'll bring up that kind of came up on the panel was through a bunch of us was the importance of expertise in the new lobbying world. And when I came up lobbying in the state legislature in the 80s, I heard stories about the 70s and 60s where it was simply relationship lobbying. In our state, I think there were 10 lobbyists in the 60s and 70s. One was Boeing, because they were headquartered there, and unions and tobacco and those things. And it was mostly just relationships. They rarely talk details and expertise, but it's kind of transitioned now. But what is the mix now between our panel on the value of access and relationships versus expertise? I know it's a combination of both, but do you want to have any perspectives? Maybe start with Adam.
They perfectly complement each other, right? You could, if you're the world's most foremost expert on cryptocurrency, but you don't have any relationships on Capitol Hill or in a particular agency that is working to evaluate or regulate or whatever it might be on it, then it doesn't matter what you know. You know, unless you've got a great media publicist that can get you on every media show in the country, then it just doesn't matter. But at the same time, you could have the world's greatest Rolodex and get access to everyone in Washington, D.C. But if you don't offer anything of substance and value and connect the dots to that office, to the member, and how it relates to their goals, their vision and priorities, to that they're seeking from the office to represent their district or their state, then you're really just having kind of a social, you know, coffee or beer at the end of the day. So you have to have that delicate balance, and you have to also be able to know how much of the expertise you can really push out in each individual meeting, right? You've got to be aware of your situation and surroundings. And if you see that what you're saying is completely going over your audience's head, then you've got to know how to pull that back and reevaluate and repurpose the message that you're pushing.
Are you seeing in the DC lobbying firms kind of the just relationship lobbying types are going away, and more it's that balanced people that have both? Is that kind of
I think it varies by firm. Yeah. Some firms want a mix, some want one of each.
I can talk about what it was like in-house, because I was in-house twice, so I know kind of who we retained and why. So first of all, when I first went to Chrysler, it was the first time I went into lobbying. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know this person, I don't know that person. then once you realize, first of all, when you're around a lot of people, like somebody else knows you, I realized, like, especially when we got into the crisis and I had to help rescue the company, which was like a spiral where we had to get all sorts of things done. I realized, you know what, if you have the right personality and you know how Hill people think because you've worked up there, you can get into the offices. Now, getting into the member or getting in to see the president, that's a whole different thing. But I think you need a mixture. So, you know, you need, for instance, at Chrysler, my background is in financial services. So I was definitely on a learning curve on like some of the other issues, right? But so I had very weird tax issues that I had to lobby on, and we were owned by private equity. So we were unique among the big three. I was using subject matter experts on the tax lobbying. I would have been a disaster on Capitol Hill. However, you know, I needed firms that kind of also knew people or knew how certain institutions work. Like they were outside the room when the senators had their weekly lunch and then said, I found out X, Y, and Z. Or maybe I would hire someone for a particular project because I need a specific senator or House member. You know, I had to deal with financial services, ironically, during Chrysler's rescue. I would have never thought I would be in my own committees. But I kind of knew, like, and asked around, who is the person that's the best connected? So you really do need both. And I don't discount either, but I also think, I'll say this, that for me as a lobbyist, and for those who like have that relationships, I'm a big believer in knowing your stuff, but also trying to do things quietly, not publicizing it. Like I can see, like, I'm involved in an industry right now that's going around bragging about how much money they're raising for their industry and how powerful that's going to be. Well, that's a terrible lobbying strategy. Like, so what you do, you want to try to do it in a low-key way. I try not to be in the press unless it's about substance. I do not want to be in the press because of you know, a connection with someone or you know, a company that has problems. I think so. That is something that's really key to me in terms of advocacy. I want to add a point I think that we forgot, because I know people hate, I'm a lawyer and people hate lobbyists even more than lawyers, so I'm a little lawyer and a lobbyist. But when I was listening to the talks, right, when you talk about sort of energy companies, which I have no problems, I work for a car company, you know, so you have the energy companies that represent energy, right? But you have the environmental groups who are, you know, representing other interests. You have groups that are representing teachers. You have groups that are representing unions. You have, you know, all the groups. You know, my father unfortunately had ALS years ago. I've done some advocacy on a pro bono base for ALS. So that's why lobbying is not a dirty word. That's why I say regulated lobbying is a part of democracy. It's a way for people to voice their concerns in a way that is accessible, complies with the law, is safe, is ethical. I'm sorry for going on, but I'm a big believer in our system. It's not perfect. There are some ugly things about it, but it's generally speaking, it works well.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, information it drives things, and by having a healthy lobbying community, you're able to move that forward the best way. Questions?
So the question in, let's call it less sophisticated societies, and I come from Africa, so, you know, emerging economies and that, where lobbying isn't regulated, and it's almost a free for all at times. And so you have this situation, you know, where when you want to reach certain people in power to have a lobbying situation, and Felix, you might agree with me on this, there's the term of working with fixers. And these fixers, you know, don't do it free. They want, you know, introduction fees and, you know, all sorts of things. And that really puts you at risk, you know, with things like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and things like that. How would you say, for somebody who comes from that sort of environment, where they come to the United States, some of the when they, because I mentioned one of the speakers, if you come from a monarchy, it's completely different. If you come from a democratic republic, it's completely different. If you come from an autocratic republic, it's different. What are some of the things that you would say, if you're going to throw down your roots here and become a lobbyist, what are like one or two lessons that you should be absolutely sure about and avoid before you land up in prison?
Well,
yeah, I mean, so is it that, are you representing the foreign company is what you're saying? Or is it the foreign company or the foreign government?
I'm just saying, loosely, if you know, you're a person who's been a successful lobbyist in an emerging economy, and you decide to, a company or you on your own decide to come to the United States and become a lobbyist here. What are some of the goals?
So first of all, I'm going to answer that question in a very, maybe it's going to sound bad, but I'm going to say it for, you know, about it. I would not, me, myself, I would never go and try to lobby the European Commission. I know people who are great at that. I would say that to lobby in the US, you know, first of all, there are people in the US that think because they read the news every day that they can lobby. They're not super effective because they don't understand the intricacies of how the government works and how it interacts with each other. So I would not, so for instance, I would never go and try to lobby in Africa, like, or in Europe. I know my limits. I don't think it's a good idea for a lobbyist who doesn't have that experience to just come in and think they're going to understand the US system, not without a lot of like learning. And I always think you need either some form of either state government experience or federal, either of those. In terms of people that have worked for me, they've had one or the other. Most of the time when foreign clients come to us, Kateryna knows this very well, we are a law firm. Usually there are legal steps that you should be taking before you do anything, depending on the country, right? So, you know, if it's a country that's known for, you know, corruption and things like that, you've got to like look at things like sanctions and OFAC. You might have to do, so there's legal work. You might have to do, depending on who's involved with it, a FARA filing. You obviously have to comply with all the lobbying compliance, but you may also, depending if it's truly a good lobbying firm, they will, if it's, you know, a country, again, known for corruption or other types of problems or doesn't get along well with the US, they should be doing some kind of due diligence and background check on you. Otherwise, it's going to backfire. That can be costly, but generally speaking, I don't do that work. Other people in my firm work. You need that legal work typically before you can move into the lobbying work.
Yeah, I'll close that out so we can get to the discussion. But I think what I would recommend is to anybody wanting to do lobbying here is just the messaging is that it's a very compliant culture now, not just coming out of our legislatures and Congress, but the corporations. I mean, our larger corporations, you know, we have to go through a secure-mate process for everybody we bring on because the companies are now moving to this extra level of caution when it comes to things like this. So I think the messaging is here. It's not like, you know, we experience in other countries, and it's changing, and hopefully the rest of the world follows that line too, because we're all better for it if we take the corruption out of government relations. So I think we're going to take a question from the audience or from the internet, but I don't see Kateryna. So maybe while we wait, another discussion point somebody wants to bring up?
Yeah, I always like have discussions. I was listening to all the discussions about the environment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, there she is.
You have questions on email.
Okay.
Where?
On email.
Ah, okay. Okay, the question is coming in is, are elections financed by lobbyists? Is it the same in every country? So I think we have maybe talk about a point of the lobbyists being funded with funding their own money campaign versus clients, and maybe we hand it over to you, Adam, to talk about the difference of.
I mean, U.S. campaigns aren't funded by lobbyists, right? In the sense that I think you brought up earlier, there's a division about when you're working with members of Congress in their office, where we can talk about policy and governance versus the campaign. You know, if you're meeting with a member in their House office, you can't talk about the campaign. You can't hand them a contribution for their campaign in that setting. There's divisions to keep those two worlds separate.
No quid pro quo.
Yes. Now, lobbyists can donate personally, right? I can write a check to any candidate that I want, but that, just like in lobbying, right? You're disclosing the clients that you work for and the financial side of the relationship and the issues that you're lobbying and to who. In the campaign world, that is also disclosed, right? So if I do write a check to Joe Biden for president, I'm going to show up on his campaign's financial disclosure filings as someone who donated towards that. So you can be involved in both, but they have to be played in two different arenas.
Right.
And maybe I should talk a little bit about sort of PAC and campaign contributions. So, and I don't know every single thing, and it's been changing and actually getting sort of looser in some ways. So, it's not, some lobbyists or lobbying firms do spend, either they have PACs or some lobbyists will spend their own personal money to write personal checks in terms of getting access and relationships. But, a lot of companies have a PAC where, you can't force people to contribute, but you have, if it's a large company, you have a whole campaign to get people to contribute. And there are limits on how much people can give to you, the PAC. There are limits on how much can be given to the candidates. There are different types of contributions and organizations. There are also, you can also, some companies will do personal checks. There are a lot of laws around that. For instance, if I collect all the checks I'm bundling, which you want to, then I have to disclose that I've done that. There are things that are called super PACs, which some of them corporations can give money that's non-disclosable. So there is a lot of money in U.S. politics. And most of it has to be disclosed. And you have to be strategic. Every company does something different. There are some companies that say, you know what, we're not giving anything right now. And there are some companies that are very active. But yeah, that whole area. And you cannot be, what I would say is you have to be a US citizen to make a contribution. Like making a contribution and you're like from a foreign country, that is a big no, right? I mean, it's very embarrassing.
Yeah. I think we're very unique in the United States compared to the rest of the world too. It's, we have a process where we donate to every single politician in the world, in the Congress or in the state legislatures, where in other countries you're more donating to the party. But I want to hear from from a corporate client perspective. In your world, how do you see about engaging in financial donations to campaigns or parties? Maybe what have you seen in your career from a business perspective? From different countries as well.
I will tell you frankly, we never participate in any kind of donations like this. Yeah. So our engagement with government generally during last 2 years, the biggest our engagement with government was work for CDC Foundation. And because for CDC came with a very strong idea initially when COVID hit, because it happens to be that CDC doesn't have any actual information about healthcare in the country. Right. they getting all information from states probably 2, 3, 4 weeks later. So they and Dell came with the idea to build a system to monitor all seniors in US. It's like 35 million people. And they wanted to use our technology as a technological foundation for it. Unfortunately, as time passed, it all was disappeared by bureaucracy. And we are still in the same position with CDC as it was in 2020.
Do you have a
I don't have right now any kind of
you're aware of
financial lobbying.
No. But you're aware of how the system works here. You've been here to know. Does it kind of shock you of how the financial campaign system works here compared to other countries?
Not really, because I think it's a more good, and there are a lot of attempts in any case to prohibit corruption. Sometimes it's works, sometimes probably not.
I have question about that. I think that it's the same in the same country. I think that in I'm also explore your structures of these PACs and super PACs, and it's understandable connection between like public policy of one or other party and donations which they get. On my perspective, maybe I'm wrong, but in countries of Eastern Europe, it's very big question, because the election, for example, in Ukraine start from $70 million to do this campaign in Ukraine, because it's 40 million people. And that's why it's a big problem that really you can't fundraise from $10 from population, because population is poor. So they don't give money to political party. Middle class, yes, but middle class, it's 10%. In Ukraine, in Moldova, in Georgia, from 10 to 15. So it's not a lot. And that's why it's, I think, also big problems to synchronize legislation about financing of political forces or candidates and financing of lobbying. And I think that it's very related questions, because in Israel, they have quite good questions. So if a person go to elections, a person can take loan in bank, like loan for elections. It's very interesting question that if you lose your elections, it's your loan, like it's your responsibility, or party can pay for you. So it's very strict regulation, and really even prime minister can go to jail if they don't go to this regulation. Of course, in countries of Europe, it's not the same. That's why we sometimes have situations with people in some like how long who pay for their election campaign want, and it's give biggest disbalance between needness of society, for example, in medical reform or in tax reform or in education reform, and needness of big business who needs only to monopolize some industry. Also some
right? So US has the largest private sector in the world. And so there's a lot of, and then we have all these interest groups. So there's a lot of money that can go into campaigns here. A lot of the money is spent on television, which is very expensive. And but it's regulated, and I don't mean to be funny, but it's definitely better than a system of somebody giving a yacht to an oligarch, right? We have a sort of we have a very we have a set of rules.
Yeah, but election campaign is $2 billion in your country, yes?
It depends on the election and then how much it depends on which state it is, what member it is. is it the president? You know, it's going to depend.
Yeah, I see that on president it was $2 billion. Yes, $2 billion.
I don't know the number, but it sounds probably about right.
Sounds right.
Could be more, you know.
We have
Don't be
five,
shame about that.
yeah, we have 5 minutes, and I wanted to take this question.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a very quick comment. I think Tom from Canada, and arguably we have one of the most stringent government relations rules around lobbying. It's very refreshing to hear from our American colleagues that, you know, stricter rules have been in place in the past, whatever, how many years, because we joke about you guys in in the you know, in the North, but the fact that you have so much more leeway when it comes to lobbying than us. And it's like, oh, the Americans, like, they just do it better. They've got so much more room to play with and work around issues. So from a commentary perspective, it's great to hear that, you know, more is happening in terms of curbing corruption when it comes to lobbying in the US.
I think things have gotten crazy in Canada. I could not believe when, like, the protesters, I cannot believe that people's bank accounts would be shut down. That is just, I cannot imagine that. I cannot imagine that in the US. It's just unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
Great. Well, you know, I think we're just at about time. It might be a good time to stop since I know you're running behind a little bit. But I want to thank our panel. Appreciate your contributions, and I hope that it helped educate your international audience on some of the things that go on in the US and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Now we have coffee break, and then one more panel, and then my panel. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Words,
You know, it's funny. These companies, they didn't know they had to do it, so they didn't like
Thank you. It's great to meet you. Thank you. Thank you. It was good to meet
Wow, good guy.
Yeah. I am too. Yeah. Yeah. What brings you here?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
It was really nice to meet you. I know, I'm sorry. Single experience.
Yeah, well, you got a lot to offer.
I never worked with branches. I worked on them.
So we